good time. And I thought he was kidding, and I'm like, huh? He's like, I'm taking you back home, you're not my type. Oh my god. I'm sure it's because I'm overweight that he's showing off. Don't wanna have to wait like consecutive days or whatever. And I'm just like, wow. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Way tonight.
People don't want to date me in my day-to-day life. Like, if he was actually interested, then they probably would have gone that. We'll make a new tomorrow. He doesn't like ask questions about himself, and I know that the answer is he's just not interested. Like I'm aware of that, but like neither is anybody else. And at some point, I don't want to be single forever.
You see, women are constantly being lied to by other women, and they forget that if you are dating men, then maybe you should actually try to date men instead of other women. Otherwise, why the hell would a guy hit you? It is truly baffling that many women engage in activities that men clearly do not find attractive in a long-term partner, and then complain when they get rejected. This was why men aren't committing to women. Please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos.
Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight. Better off, I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight. Better off, I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight. Better off, I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy face?
Okay, here we are, ready for chapter 2, actually. It's our third part, but our second chapter. First one was just the prologue and all that, introduction. So, are we ready to find out some more about the Templars in Scotland? I certainly am, so let's just jump into it. Chapter 2, Military Monks, the Knights Templar. How's my sound? Yeah, looks okay. All right. Even before their dissolution, the Knights Templar had been shrouded in extravagant myth and legend, dark rumors, suspicions, and superstitions. In the centuries following their suppression, the mystique surrounding them intensified, and genuine mystery became even more swathed in spurious mystification. During the 18th and 19th centuries, as we shall see, certain rites of Freemasonry assiduously sought to establish a pedigree dating back to the Templars. At the same time, other Neo-Templar organizations began to appear, similarly claiming a pedigree derived from the original order. Today, there are no fewer than 5 organizations in existence alleging one or another species of direct descent from the white-mantled warrior monks of the Middle Ages. And despite the cynicism and skepticism of our age, there is, even for outsiders, something fascinating, even romantic, about the soldier mystics of 700 years ago, and their black and white banner and distinctively splayed red cross. They have passed into the heritage of our folklore and tradition. They appeal to the imagination, not just as crusaders, but as something far more enigmatic and evocative. As high-level intrigueurs and power brokers. As guardians of fabulous treasure, as sorcerers and arcane initiates, as custodians of a secret knowledge. Time has served them better than they, in the throes of their last ordeals, could ever have anticipated. Time, however, has also obscured the identity and character of the human beings behind the exotic veil of romance. The human beings and the true nature of the institution they created. Questions still remain, for example, about how orthodox or heretical the Templars' beliefs really were. Questions remain about how guilty they were of the charges leveled against them. Questions remain about the internal high-level activities of the order, their secret grand designs, their project for the creation of a Templar state, their policy of reconciling Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Questions remain about the influences that shaped the order, the infection of the Cathar heresy, and the impact of older non-Pauline or Pauline forms of Christian thought encountered by the knights in the Holy Land. Questions remain about what happened to the wealth accumulated by these supposedly poor soldiers of Christ, a wealth which kings sought to plunder and which vanished without trace. Questions remain about the Templars' rituals and the mysterious idol they allegedly worshipped under the cryptic name of Baphomet. And questions remain about the supposed secret knowledge to which the upper echelons of the order, at least, were reputedly privy. What was the nature of this knowledge? Was it truly occult in the sense charged by the Inquisition, involving forbidden magical practices, obscene and blasphemous rites? Was it political and cultural, pertaining, for example, to the origins of Christianity? Was it scientific and technological, encompassing such things as drugs, poisons, medicine, architecture, cartography, navigation, and trade routes? The more closely one examines the Templars, the more such questions as these tend not to resolve themselves, but to proliferate. As we have noted, the history of the Templars is almost precisely contemporary with that of the feudal Celtic kingdom of Scotland. From the reign of David I to that of Bruce, on the surface, there would appear to be little else in common between the Scottish monarchy and the military religious order created in the Holy Land, and yet a number of connections obtained between them, some dictated by the geopolitics of the medieval world, some by more elusive factors which have never been properly chronicled. By 1314, these connections would have rendered quite possible a Templar presence at Bannockburn. The rise of the Templars. According to most sources, the Knights Templar, the poor knights of the Temple of Solomon, were created in 1118, although there is significant evidence to suggest they were already in existence at least 4 years earlier. Their ostensible raison d'être was to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land. The evidence suggests, however, that this avowed purpose was a facade, and that the knights were engaged in a much more ambitious, more grandiose geopolitical design, which involved the Cistercian order, Saint Bernard and Hughes, Count of Champagne, and one of the first sponsors and patrons of both the Cistercians and the Templars. The Count became a Templar himself in 1124, and the order's first Grand Master was one of his own vassals, Hugh de Payens. Among the other founding members was Saint Bernard's uncle, André de Montbard. Until 1128, 4 years after David I became King of Scotland, the Templars were said to have consisted of only 9 knights, although the actual records show several additional recruits. Besides Hugh de Champagne, these include Fulk, Comte d'Anjou, father of Geoffrey Plantagenet, and grandfather of Henry II of England. Nevertheless, the order's initial enrollment seems to have been relatively small. Then at the Council of Troyes, conducted under the auspices of St. Bernard, the Templars were given a monastic rule, the equivalent, so to speak, of a constitution, and were thereby formally established. They represented a new phenomenon. Quote, for the first time in Christian history, soldiers would live as monks, end quote. From 1128 on, the order expanded at an extraordinary pace, receiving not just a massive influx of recruits, but also immense donations of both money and property. Within a year, they owned lands in France, England, Scotland, Spain, and Portugal. Within a decade, their possessions would extend to Italy, Austria, Germany, Hungary, and Constantinople. In 1131, the King of Aragon bequeathed to them a third of his domains. By the mid-12th century, the temple had already begun to establish itself as the single most wealthy and powerful institution in Christendom, with the sole exception of the papacy. In the years immediately following the Council of Troyes, Hugh de Payens and others founding members of the order traveled extensively in Europe, promoting everything from themselves to the virtues of timeshare fiefdoms in Palestine. Hughes and at least one of his comrades are known to have been in both England and Scotland, according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, when Hughes visited Henry I. Quote, the king received him with much honor, and gave him rich presents in gold and in silver, and afterwards he sent him into England, and there he was received by all good men, who all gave him presents, and in Scotland also, and he invited the folk out to Jerusalem, and there went with him and after him more people than ever did before. End quote. On this first visit, Philip de Harcourt conferred on the order their preceptory at Shipley in Essex. The Dover preceptory, the remains of its church are still visible today, is believed to date to the same time. As Grand Master, Hugh de Payens proceeded to appoint regional masters for each of the temple's provinces, as its enclaves of property in each country were called. The first master of England, of whom little is known, was one Hugh de Argentien. Argentine? I don't know. He was succeeded by a young Norman knight, Osto de Saint-Omer, something like that, who presided until 1153 or 4. Then by Richard de Hastings. Under these two masters, the Templars in England embarked on one of their most innovative ventures, a translation of part of the Old Testament into the vernacular. This version of the Book of Judges took the form of a chivalric romance, Joshua and his fierce knights. The relations between the Templars and the rulers of those realms where they possessed lands were mixed. In France, for example, the relationship was always, even at its best, uneasy. In Spain, on the other hand, the relationship was consistently good. In England, too, for the most part, the order enjoyed a cordial rapport with the monarchy. As we have seen, Henry I received the first knights with open arms, while Stephen, who seized power in 1135, was the son of the Count of Blois, B-L-O-I-S, I'm not sure. Count of Blois? Yeah, anyway. One of the leaders of the First Crusade, and was thus particularly sympathetic to the Templars' activities in the Holy Land. Under his auspices, the network of preceptories began to spread across England. The Earl of Derby donated Bisham. The Earl of Warwick donated land for a preceptory at Warwick itself. Roger de Bouillé, I don't know, offered the Builli, offered the site of Willowton in Lincolnshire. Stephen's own wife, Matilda, bestowed tracts of territory in Essex and Oxford, which became Temple Cressing and Temple Cowley, respectively, two of the most important early preceptories. During Stephen's reign, too, the Templars built their first central installation in England. This, the Old Temple, was located at Holborn. It consisted of the preceptory buildings, a church, a garden, an orchard, and a cemetery, all surrounded by a boundary ditch and, it is believed, a wall. Its foundations existed on the site of what is now the underground station at High Holborn. This did not, however, remain the order's seat in London for long. By 1161, the Knights had already established themselves in the New Temple, the site of which even today bears their name and contains not only their original round church, but also a number of graves. Barum Novi Temple, or Temple Bar, where Fleet Street meets the Strand, was the gate opening into the order's precincts. In its heyday, the new temple extended from Aldwych up the Strand and halfway along Fleet Street, then down to the Thames, where it had its own wharf. Once a year, a general chapter was convened on these premises, attended by the Master of England and all other officers of the order in Britain, including the priors of Scotland and Ireland. Henry II continued the close association of the English monarchy with the Temple, who were especially active in trying to reconcile him with Thomas A. Becket. But it was under Henry's son, Richard Coeur de Lion, that association became closest. Indeed, Richard was on such good terms with the order that he is often regarded as a kind of honorary Templar. He consorted regularly with the knights. He traveled in their ships, resided in their preceptories. When having antagonized his fellow potentates, he was obliged to flee the Holy Land. He did so disguised as a Templar. and an entourage of authentic Templars attended him. He was closely embroiled in the transactions between the Templars and their Islamic equivalents, the Hashishim or assassins. He also sold Cyprus to the order, and the island later became, for a time, their official seat. At the same time, the temple had by then become influential and powerful enough to command respect and allegiance from Richard's brother and arch-rival King John. Like Richard, John stayed regularly at the London Preceptory, making it his part-time residence during the last 4 years of his reign, 1212 to 1216. The Master of England, Aymeric de Saint-Maur, was John's closest advisor, and it was primarily as a result of Aymeric's persuasion that the king signed the Magna Carta in 1215. When John appended his signature to the document, Aymeric was at his side and signed as well. Subsequently, Aymeric was named one of the executors of John's will. Officially, the temple's primary sphere of activity was supposed to be the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. Europe was supposed to be but a support base, both a source for men and material, and a channel for their transport to the Holy Land. Certainly, the Templars never let Outremer, the land across the sea, as they called the Middle East, slip out of their focus. Their activities extended at least from Egypt, if not from points west, all the way to Constantinople. Few decisions were made in the Crusader principalities, and little happened there in which the Templars were not involved. At the same time, however, as their role in the signing of the Magna Carta indicates, the Knights were soon deeply embroiled in the internal affairs of most European kingdoms. In England, they enjoyed particular privileges and prerogatives. Thus, for example, the Master of the Temple sat in Parliament as the premier baron of the realm, and the order was also, of course, exempt from taxes, and metal Templar crosses marked its houses and holdings in larger English towns and cities, warding off tax collectors. Specimens of these crosses from the Street of the Templars in Leeds can be seen today in the Museum of the Order of St. John, Clerkenwell. Within such enclaves, the knights were a law unto themselves. They offered rights of sanctuary like any church. They convened their own courts to try cases of local crime. They ran their own markets and fairs. They were exempt from tolls on roads, bridges, and rivers. Templar possessions in England were extensive and spanned the length and breadth of the country. Some, though by no means all, of the order's former lands are recognizable today by the prefix Temple, as in the London district of Temple Fortune, just north of Golders Green. It is generally accepted that wherever this prefix occurs in the British Isles, there was once some species of Templar installation. To compile a definitive list of the order's holding is today impossible, but even the most conservative estimates show a minimum of 74 major properties, including 30 full-scale preceptories and literally hundreds of smaller belongings, villages, hamlets, churches, and farms. On occasion, the order's commercial activities even led them to establish towns of their own. Baldock, for example, near Letchworth in Hertfordshire, was founded by the Templars around 1148. Its name derives from Baghdad. Excuse me. Oh, I just realized I didn't have any captions. What's going on there? Sorry, let me fix that real quick. I like to have those. It only takes a second here. Just bear with me. There we go. That should be working now. Sorry about that. All this time, we're 25 minutes in. Derives from Baghdad. A substantial section of modern Bristol was once Templar property. Indeed, Bristol was one of the major ports for the order, and ships trafficked regularly between the city and the Templars' primary Atlantic base of La Rochelle in France. The close rolls of Henry III cite the names of two Templar ships, La Templière and Le Buscard. One of the knights' most lucrative privileges was that of exporting their own wool. This, like the transport of pilgrims, brought in very considerable revenues, as too did the order's lands in Yorkshire alone during. Did the order's lands. Period. In Yorkshire alone during 1308, Temple properties produced an income of £1,130. At that time, a modest castle could be built for £500. A knight and a squire could be employed for a year for 55, a crossbowman for £7. A horse costs £9, making it cheaper to ride a crossbowman. In Ireland, the Templars' network of holdings was equally widespread, though less well documented. There were at least 6 preceptories, one in Dublin, at least 3 on the south coast in counties Waterford and Wexford. As in England, there were numerous manors, farms, churches, and castles. The preceptory of Kilsaran in County Louth, for example, owned 12 churches and collected tithes from 8 others. There was at least one manor, Temple House at Sligo, on the west coast. As we shall see, the question of other Templar installations in the west of Ireland is of crucial importance. For Scotland, records are particularly patchy and unreliable, partly because of the turmoil in the kingdom at the end of the 13th century, partly because much appears to have been deliberately concealed. There were at least 2 major preceptories. One, Maryculter, was near Aberdeen. The other, Ballintroduch, Gaelic for Stead of the Warriors, was larger and constituted the order's primary Scottish base. Situated near Edinburgh, it is now called Temple. The compilation of Templar properties in Scotland, however, is based on the testimony of one knight, William de Middleton, interrogated by the Inquisition. He mentioned Maryculter and Ballintroduch as the 2 places in which he had personally served. This, of course, does not exclude the possibility, indeed the likelihood, of others at which he did not serve, and he had, in any case, every reason to be economical with the truth. In fact, chronicles refer to Templar holdings at Berwick, then part of Scotland, and at Liston, near Falkirk. Quite apart from Argyll, there is evidence of Templar possession in, at the very least, another 10 locations in Scotland, but there is no way of knowing if these were large or small, if they were preceptories, manors, or merely farms. The financial influence of the Templars. By virtue of its possessions, its manpower, its diplomatic skills, and its martial expertise, the Temple wielded enormous political and military influence. But it was no less influential financially and wrought profound changes in the economic foundations of the age. Historians generally ascribe the evolution and development of Western Europe's economic institutions to Jewish moneylenders and to the great Italian merchant houses and consortiums. In fact, however, the role of Jewish moneylenders was minor compared to that of the Temple, and the Temple not only predated the Italian houses, but established the machinery and procedures which those houses were later to emulate and adopt. In effect, the origins of modern banking can be attributed to the order of the Temple. At the peak of their power, the Templars handled much, if not most, of the available capital in Western Europe. They pioneered the concept of credit facilities, as well as the allocation of credit for commercial development and expansion. They performed, in fact, virtually all the functions of a 20th century merchant bank. In theory, canon law forbade Christians to engage in usury, the collection of interest on loans. One might expect this interdict to have been applied even more stringently to an institution as ostensibly pious as the temple. Nevertheless, the temple lent money and collected interest on a massive scale. In one proven case, the agreed rate of interest on late payment of debt was 60% per year, 17% more than Jewish moneylenders were allowed to claim. The strictures of canon law against usury were evaded by nothing more elaborate than semantics, euphemism, and circumlocution. One can only speculate on the terms used by the Templars themselves in order to avoid speaking explicitly of interest, since few of their documents survive, but the recipients of Templar loans in their repayment instructions are not bound by any such reserve. In his repayment to the temple, Edward I, to cite but one of many possible examples, speaks of the capital component and quite specifically the interest. In fact, the English crown was chronically in debt to the temple. King John borrowed incessantly from the order. So too did Henry III, who between 1260 and 1266, his treasury depleted and by military expeditions, even pawned the English crown jewels to the Templars, Queen Eleanor personally taking them to the order's Paris preceptory. In the years before Henry ascended the throne, the Templars also lent money to the future Edward I. During the first year of his reign, Edward repaid 2,000 marks on a total debt to the order of £28,189. One of the most important of the Temple's financial activities was arranging payments at a distance between the actual transfer of funds. In an age when travel was uncertain, when roads were unprotected and plunder a constant risk, men were understandably reluctant to travel with valuables in their possessions. The Robin Hood legends bear eloquent testimony to the threat constantly looming over wealthy merchants, tradesmen, even nobles. In consequence, the temple devised letters of credit. One would deposit a particular sum in, say, the London temple, and receive a species of chit, C-H-I-T. One could then travel freely to other parts of Britain, to most of the continent, even to the Holy Land. At one's destination, one would only to present the chit, and one would receive cash in whatever the currency desired. Theft of such letters of credit was, as well as fraud, was precluded by an elaborate system of codes to which the Templars alone were privy. In addition to lending money and providing letters of credit, the Templars provided, through their network of preceptories, places of safe deposit. In France, the Paris Temple was also the most important royal treasury, housing the state's wealth as well as the orders, and the Knights Treasurer was also the king's. All the finances of the French crown were thus yoked to and dependent upon the temple. In England, the order's influence was not quite so great. As we have noted, however, the crown jewels during the reign of King John were kept at the London Temple, which under Henry II, John, Henry III, and Edward I served as one of the 4 royal treasuries. In England, the Templars also acted as tax collectors. Not only did they collect papal taxes, tithes, and donations, they collected taxes and revenues for the crown as well, and seem to have been even more fearsome in their capacity than today's inland revenue. In 1294, they organized the conversion from old to new money. They frequently acted as trustees of funds or property placed in their custody or as brokers and as debt collectors. They mediated in disputes involving ransom payments, dowries, pensions, and a multitude of other transactions. At the apex of their power, the Templars were accused of pride, arrogance, ruthlessness, and intemperate and dissolute behavior. To drink like a Templar was a frequent simile in medieval England, and despite their vow of chastity, the knights seem to have wenched as zealously as they drank. But whatever their conduct in such respects as these, their reputation for accuracy, honesty, and integrity in financial affairs remained untarnished. One might not like them, but one knew one could rely on them. And they were particularly harsh to any member of their own order who proved unworthy. In one instance, the prior of the temple in Ireland was found guilty of embezzlement. He was imprisoned in the penitential cell of the Templar Church in London, a room too small even to lie down in, which can still be seen today, and starved to death. He is said to have taken 8 weeks to die. Like the Swiss banks of today, the temple maintained a number of long-term trust funds from the dead and or dispossessed. Not surprisingly, monarchs or other potentates would occasionally try to lay hands on such resources. Thus, for example, Henry II, in one instance, demanded from the Templars the money deposited with them by a disgraced lord. He was told that money confided to them in trust they would deliver to no man without the permission of him who had entrusted it to be kept in the temple. The poor knights' most lasting achievement was economic. No medieval institution did more for the rise of capitalism, but the very wealth they managed so effectively was to render them an irresistible lure to a monarch whose temerity was equal to his greed. And that's the end of that chapter. So not too bad. That was a short chapter compared to the last one. I'm still only going to do one chapter a night just to save my voice. So the next chapter looks like it's about the same length, so that might be the trend from here on out. We'll see. But anyway, one chapter a reading. I'm doing it 3 times a week, so it's not like it's going to take a long time to get through this book. So that will be it. I am going to end this session and take a quick break, get my adult cocktail ready, and I will be back for some Hogwarts Legacy. So see you at about 9:30. Have a good night. See you next time.
Prepare to die. Prepare to die. Welcome to a whole new world. Your planet is now under Mid-Ranger's control. Humanity will be exterminated. If you hear this message, Dinner's trying to leave.